the Ireland chapter of PMI, our series of webinars. After a short break for the summer, we are kicking off with an all-important update on the new PMP exam, as well as the changes to the ATP program. So if you made a resolution at the start of the year to sit the exam and get certified, now is the perfect time to make good on that promise. So here's where you can start with Seamus Collins, Managing Director of Velopi, which is a PMI Authorized training partner. So welcome, Seamus, and thank you for speaking with our chapter members today.
Okay. So look, I'm Seamus Collins. I'm going to speak for about maybe 20 minutes, half hour. Then I'm going to leave enough time for questions. So I have a short presentation. I'll talk you through it. And usually the questions take a bit longer because people have very specific scenarios and situations that are pertinent to themselves. And I can answer those hopefully for you today. And I'll share these slides at the end as well with you. Okay, so Katrina, have you other things you need to go through and then I can launch straight into this?
Absolutely, yes. So just before I hand over, I just want to let everyone know that there's a couple of things going to be covered today, as Seamus said. I'm judging by our LinkedIn post that we made a couple of days ago. I actually got quite a little bit of feedback from people both on the LinkedIn and also to my email. So I've actually collected a small few questions for you later on when you have time for the Q&A, Seamus. But also, as you just mentioned there to the audience, please pop your questions into the chat and we will try and get through them all. And we can always follow up afterwards if we don't manage to get through them all. So a lot of people already know who you are, Seamus. So as Managing Director of Velopi, it sounds like some of our membership have already used you in their training and you come very highly regarded by some of our members. So we're delighted to have you speak with us today.
Thank you. Okay, so I can start. And look,
thank you.
The first thing I would say, any one of you that's met us on a course, usually the questions, if you're in the audience, you'll get peppered with questions and we'll put you under pressure to get your perspective on something. For the next hour here, you're very safe because I can't question you. So, but you can question me and I encourage you to ask questions. And if there's something you can't ask here, maybe I'll leave my contact details at the end and I'm quite happy to talk to people. So look, I just share my screen here. And as I said, I'll share these slides after with you as well. And let's make a start. Now, what I want to talk you through is the new Pmi Atp program and the new Pmp exam. And every couple of years, the PMI, they come along and they make a change to the exam. And there's always a big rush of people, to get over the line. And we've been through this a number of times through Pmbok 3, 4, 5, 6, and now with the imminent release of Pmbok 7. With COVID last year and different things were delayed, etc. But eventually it did come through at the end of the year to change the PMP exam and also to change the provider setup. And I just want to talk to you briefly about the ATP program. But then I assume most people here are interested in the new exam. What does it mean? What does the content look like, etc., etc. Okay. So look, without wasting too much time, the PMI, we're what was called a registered education provider for a number of years. And the registered education provider was a pretty straightforward program. You could register your company. You had to provide certain details, pay a certain fee. And that was pretty straightforward. The PMI came along last year and replaced this with what they called an authorized training partner program. And when I heard about it initially, I thought it was like a certain rebadging of something, but it would be the same thing pretty much. And that was a naive view. And then suddenly we started to peel back what they would look for to become an authorized training partner and what it meant for us, but also what it meant for you then as a person coming on a PMP exam preparation course. Now, I'm not going to go through the whole history and all their justifications for it, but I want to point out to you some of the main differences so that you're aware of what's happened. The first thing was previously we could design, once we were a rep, we could design our own course notes. We could come up with our own exercises, case studies, etc., etc. And the PMI, and their big reason, they said, well, there's so many different providers. Some people are seeing very high success rates at the exams, high take rates, or as they would call it as well. And we're not seeing the same with other reps. So there's obviously maybe a quality problem not just in the materials, but maybe also with the trainers. So they then said, okay, going forward, the authorized training partners, we have to use the PMI content. Now, I'll show you some of that content in a moment, but at least that standardizes the look, the feel, the topics covered in the course, etc., etc. And now as an authorized training partner, we are duty bound to deliver the course using their materials. That's a big change. And obviously with that came certain fees, etc. The other big part of it was, I think they were also concerned that maybe some people were setting up as a rep very quickly, maybe without having the strength and depth to really deliver good quality project management training. And one of the things they've put in, and again, when I saw the criteria, it said, 3 years of audited accounts. And I was going like, I wouldn't even show my mother the accounts of our company. And they said, no, we have to see 3 years of fully audited accounts. And we want to make sure that, you've got the financial capability, that you're above board, et cetera, you have nothing else untoward happening. But part of their concern here, I think, as well, was that maybe if a company had taken money from students and then went bust or, went into receivership or whatever, and then suddenly people were going back to the PMI saying, how do I get my money back? You gave these guys a license. So I suppose at least by checking the finances, they know we're reasonably sound at this point and stable, and we have the wherewithal to carry these courses and do them and deliver them and support the students for months after. The other thing that was a big criteria was in the rep program, you submitted a CV, but this time out, yes, we had to do the CVs and everything else, but all the trainers had to go on a train the trainer course. Now, I've been doing this for 14 years, delivering PMI training, so it was interesting. I was thinking, my God, this is going to be 2 days of my life. But actually, when I went along, there were certain things and topics, and when you sit back and listen to some other speaker, it often gives you a new perspective. And to get their material and to get, to get trained in that, and all our trainers to get trained in that, at least it standardizes now the experience a person should have when they come to one of our classes. The other thing then, and I'll show you these in a moment, we have an instructor manual, we buy banks of questions from the PMI, because again, we would always have had lots of exam questions, but you were always trying to benchmark, where is the pass mark? If you pass our simulator, will you pass the real thing? And of course, then when we got some questions to benchmark against from the PMI, we're able to set the standard. And that's been very helpful in terms of, people that maybe were borderline to say, okay, if you pass this, you're going to pass on the day. And that gives people a confidence. So that is a bit about the ATP program. It's standardized the material, make sure you have the quality systems in place, standardize the trainers, make sure they are trained, et cetera, making sure the company is above board. And I think that reduced the number of REPs, down dramatically. So there's a smaller number of ATPs now. Now, the fees were quite dramatic in some cases as well. So there was a fee increase to cover all the additional materials. And inevitably, some of those do get passed on to the customer. And that's just, there's no other way around that. And I'll talk about that maybe later on if people have questions. Moving on to the exam and moving on to what they've changed. Right. Any of you that have ever been on a Pmp exam prep course, whether with ourselves or with anybody, you'll have seen those inputs, outputs, tools and techniques. And even if you did the Pmp 10, 15 years ago, it still strikes fear, I think, into somebody going, how will I remember all of this stuff? And in the past, it was very much process driven, I would say, very much about the 49 processes in the Pmbok. A small bit about the business environment, pre-project, a little bit about people, etc. And they've changed that now to very much what they call a value-orientated approach. There are still processes. But now the focus is that it's people executing processes in a business environment to deliver value. And if you remember the earlier versions of the Pmbok, like some of the earlier versions of the Pmbok was the project had a start and an end. You produced a deliverable. Things like benefit or measuring benefit post-project, or that wasn't your concern. You were focused on a very narrow perspective. But all of us as project managers know now, we don't do projects to produce deliverables. We produce deliverables. We do projects to get benefit. And really, that's why there's the change of mindset here. So in the past, people were very concerned about understanding which output is created, what process would I do next, very process driven. The style of question now reflects this model on the right. Okay. Now, the first bit of, that's the mindset, I suppose. Good news, people often get concerned about, oh, has the Pmbok changed? So if you haven't done the exam, what does this mean for you? Now, the Pmbok is still on the 6th edition. Now, the Pmbok, it hasn't changed at the moment. So the current version, if you did a course last year or the year before, didn't do the exam, the Pmbok 6th edition is still in place. Now, the 7th edition is imminent. But I'll show you in a moment that the change of Pmbok will no longer be, it will be a big deal for the exam, but not as big a deal as it was, because there are other sources of information referenced. And in the past, if you had a good feeling for the Pmbok, I'd often say to people, they'd say, oh, I've read the Pmbok. And I'd say, okay, that was valuable, but not. It was kind of, not all the exam ever came from the Pmbok, and not all the Pmbok was ever in the exam. But now even more so, they have referenced 10 different books. And I'll give you the names of the 10 books, and people go, I must buy all of them, get onto Amazon immediately. Do not, right? Because the 10 books have been condensed down into the student manual that you get on the course. And the 10 books are read by people like myself that have that want to look at the seminal papers on this and understand where they came up with the final document. The bad news, I suppose, and some people might say, well, that's good news. 50% of the exam now is based on process type questions, scope, schedule, etc., etc. However, the people side of things has exploded to 42%. And in the past, I suppose, the module on resource management, the module on stakeholder comms, there were some easy enough questions, but the focus was on risk, cost, schedule, etc., etc. But now the section on people has been expanded dramatically. And I'll show you some of the topics in a moment. So in the past, you just had a module on resource management. Now there's other topics in there like emotional intelligence, mentoring of junior people, etc. So it's a different, and those topics might have got a small mention in the Pmbok. Now they're whole sections of the material. The last 8% of the exam is around business. Now, again, this really is helping to look at topics like that, keep the project manager aware that, hang on, you're not doing projects to produce deliverables, you're here to bring value. And these projects, understanding concepts like net present value, return on investment, internal rate of return, compliance, all these things now are covered under this 8%. So the structure of the exam, previously would have been very much, so much on initiating, so much on planning, executing, and, we'd split up the questions the same way. Now the structure of the exam has changed. So if you're looking at some old material that's focusing on initiating, planning, executing, that's still there, but you could be missing a hell of a lot of material. The good news is this. In the past, if anyone here did the PMP or is prepping for it, in the past, it was a 200-question exam. And the big problem with the 200 questions was you had 25 questions in there that were these unmarked questions. And these unmarked questions were a really curse in a way. I know the PMI had to find some way of testing out new questions, but you were testing them out on people that were doing an exam, and you could actually break their momentum. You'd see some question in there, what is the float on the critical path or something, or else you'd see some big network diagram and you'd say, oh my God, there's some trick here. And you could spend minutes on something and then realize it was one of these unmarked questions. And the problem is it could break your momentum. In the new exam, they've reduced the number of unmarked questions down to 5. So those 20 questions that were breaking momentum and pestering people inside the exam, because there was maybe never a right answer in some cases. And we often saw that if a person got an unmarked question right, they might have spent 2 or 3 minutes on it, but they'd get the next 4 or 5 questions wrong because it broke their momentum. So the PMI, in fairness, have taken out 20 of the unmarked questions. You reduce down now to 5. So you know now, look, there's 5 of them in there, but really that's not going to do as much damage as 25. And I remember when I did my own PMP exam, I couldn't answer the first, 10 questions. I was thinking it must be the wrong exam or something. No, it was stress. But I also maybe felt they had stacked the deck and put all the unmarked ones up front. And it was a non-merciful moment of panic. But got through it, passed it anyway. But the main thing is the exam now is fairer. In the past, the exam was a 4-hour hard work slog. And if you went to the bathroom for a break at the Prometric Test Centre in Dublin, the clock stayed ticking down and you ran the corridor and you ran back and showed your passport again. And there was no room. It was hard. The new exam now is 360 question exams. And there's 10-minute breaks. So I describe it to the people on the class that it's a bit like a sprint or it's a bit like a boxing match. You can go to the corner to gather your thoughts every so often. And this is very powerful because, in a 4-hour exam, some people do get panicked, do get stressed, etc. And there's a danger that they could, just lose their timings, etc. Whereas this allows you to reset a couple of times during the exam. Now, obviously, once you do the first 60 questions, you submit those. You take your 10-minute break, you come back fresh, you go again. You take your 10-minute break, you go again. And the clock has stopped. And that's very powerful to, for some people that, the stress does get to people on the day. So this really does help them, sprint, stop, etc., etc. Now I can answer more questions on that in a moment as well for you. Now, just hide that there. So that's the way the clock works. That's the way the exam is set up, the new structure. These are the 10 reference books. Now, as I said, the 6th edition is still here. That'll be replaced by the 7th edition now, probably early next year, even though the release date or the exam change hasn't been announced. But if you look that, because now it's 9 other books also involved, you shouldn't see as much churn in the actual exam itself. Now, again, I'm waiting to see the 7th edition myself and read. I've read some of it already, but I haven't read the whole thing. But again, it's moved away from this idea of inputs, outputs, and processes, a different focus. Now, as I said, maybe that's a separate conversation to talk about Pmbok 7 in a few months' time. But these are the 10 books, and they've been condensed down then into the user manual, student manual for the actual classes. Now, just to give people a bit of a deep dive into the modules, because that's what people are usually concerned about, how different is it? And what they've done now, and I'll bring it up in a moment and I'll show you the manual as well. They have 5 lessons and they have given us specific timings for these. And they say, okay, lesson 1, we're going to create a team. Lesson 2 is starting the project. Lesson 3 is all about doing the work. Lesson 4, keeping the team on track. Lesson 5 is all about the business. Now, broadly speaking, you're getting 8% from keeping the business in mind. Now, and again, I'm just doing a broad brushstroke here, not fully true, but lessons 2 and 3, we'll see them in a moment. They're very much the process, scope, schedule, risk, procurement, etc., etc. And lesson 1 and 4 are predominantly talking about the people, building the team, managing conflict, etc. So we're going to have 50% here, 42% between 1 and 4, and 8% from 5. Now, some of lesson 3 or some of these topics here, earned value, etc., that's part of the process. But look, broadly speaking, this is the split. Okay. Now, just want to show you maybe some of the content within the topics so that you can at least say, oh, I know that. Yeah, I recognize that stuff. But I just want to show like topic 1 is all about, some of the topics here are very new for some people, and the headings, I think, confuse people at times as well. And I don't want to get too much into these, but just to give you some comfort, building a shared understanding about the project. When you dig into that material, it's very much about chartering, building understanding what's in the charter, etc. Now, the PMI, if we just go forward here, and then I'll come back and round on this, lesson 1. Lesson 2 then is where I think you should be maybe see some familiar, determining the appropriate methodology. Are we going to go agile? Would waterfall be more better here? Picking the methodology. But then you should start to see some common topics that most of you are familiar with: scope, budget, schedule, quality, integration, procurement, closure. But you can see these new topics like governance right after creeping in. Now, the one shock that when I saw this first was the PMI give us timings for this. And as a provider, they say, okay, you need to spend 10 hours, I think it's 10 hours on lesson 2. Now, if any of you have ever been on a course, you'd realize scoping and scheduling, that could be a day all by itself. In the old course where you had the 10 knowledge areas, you had pretty much scope and schedule one day, cost and risk another day, and you broke it out like that. But by God, you're coming to this course now and you're getting scope, schedule, quality, resource, an hour each pretty much. Now, we've expanded the times because I looked at this and said, I can deliver some of these topics quicker, ground rules, virtual teams, etc. But you can't, explain budget, schedule, quality, in half an hour each. So we've changed the timing slightly to suit the people that we know are in the classes. The PMI do give a disclaimer at the start of their course notes and say, well, you shouldn't really be on the course unless you know the critical path, the budget, and certain things. They put in certain disclaimers. But look, we know we meet a lot of different people coming on courses. They may not have done budgeting before. They may have done scheduling. They have done scoping. But topics like governance and procurement, they might not have touched those. So again, we've adjusted the times to suit the type of character we are meeting in class, and I suppose years of doing this. So that's lesson 2. Lesson 3, again, is about 1 day according to the guidance we've been given. But most of you know there that risk could take half a day to get through all the ideas and concepts in there. And it's a topic that people have a lot of interest in, to try and fully understand risk on project and the connection between risk and reward and opportunity and threat. And it takes a long time to trash all those things out. But you can start to see some topics here that you should recognize: risk, communication, stakeholder, change control, knowledge. But you're seeing some topics now like project artifacts, managing issues, etc. Like managing issues in the Pmbok was risks become issues, and that was pretty much how it was delivered. Now they've got a whole module on issue management, issue logs, how to address issues, how to manage issues, how to recover from issues, etc., etc. Lesson 4 then is back into the people stuff. And again, some of the stuff here is pretty standard, stakeholders, and when we're giving the class at times, we sometimes group, instead of me talking about stakeholders in module 3 and then coming back to it in module 4, we save time by, condensing common topics together. But you start to see other topics here now that are brand new in the new exam and the new topics. Like there's a full section now on emotional intelligence. And there's certain topics here, when I saw them first, I was going, that should be interesting. And they are, because a lot of project managers we meet, and I don't know who's on the call today, but a lot of project managers are people like myself that have maybe been engineers in a previous life. And apparently engineers are not known for their emotional intelligence maturity, some of us, as in we get frustrated and angry and we are impatient type characters. And actually, when I read the emotional intelligence stuff, I said, actually, I could learn something from this myself. And it's a huge thing. And so important was it is that some of our customers asked us to split off that as a separate workshop and expand it even more. Because you got to remember, at the end of the day, you get work done through people. And you need to be able to listen. You need to be able to, understand yourself, understand others, and what are your blind spots that maybe you're unaware of as well. And apparently, fair enough, you're stuck with your IQ right? And you can blame your parents for your IQ. But apparently you can develop your emotional intelligence up to and that's something a lot of project managers do need to work on. And it's something that people are giving great feedback on. They're going, actually, thought that'd be a bit waffly, but actually I realized that actually maybe something I need to read a bit more on, which is it's great to hear. The other topics in here, again, conflict used to be part of HR, or the resource module, used to be always a popular topic, but now they've expanded it. You see these other new topics here. Mentoring was never really a part of the old Pmp exam, but now there's a section on mentoring. But there's some things up here that are, I would say, are very new as well. And again, when I read it first, I was going, my God, this is getting deep now, this people stuff, because, it was all about the difference between, leadership and management. And again, I had done an MBA, and some of you will have done masters, etc., and you might understand the difference between leadership and management. And the PMI take a certain view on this, which is a pretty standard academic view. But it might, if you've done, I don't know, if you've studied Mintzberg or Drucker or some other management guru, you might go, no, Drucker wouldn't agree with that, or Mintzberg wouldn't agree with that. But look, we're doing a Pmp exam. Mintzberg and Drucker really are not in the room for those 4 hours. So in class, I'd open up these discussions, but at the same time, I'm going to keep it to the party line here. This is the way we see it, etc. And this one here, supporting team performance, that's been expanded. Earned value is in there, but they're also, talking about servant leadership and all these types of concepts, etc. Underpinning it. So there's some new topics definitely for the people stuff, but you should also see stakeholder comms, conflict, etc. as standard stuff you should understand or have been seen before. The last module, module 5, there's 4 sections. Well, in theory, there could be up to 5 sections in here, but the main topics are, they're really calling out, the first topic here is about compliance. And many of us, I suppose, we work in very regulated environments. You could have the FDA, you could have different, financial compliance regulations. You might have noise emissions. You could have regulatory bodies. You could have EPA. And it really brings that section to life, saying, as a project manager, you need to be aware of the compliance requirements for your project. And it talks about, the risks if you're not compliant, understanding how to bring yourself back into compliance, etc. So that's an interesting section as a standalone. 5B then really gets into net present values, ROIs, net promoter scores, and different ways of decision trees. There's a whole host of tools in there about understanding, is your project still bringing value to the organization or not? This next one then, it very much is focused on, your project exists in an environment, and that environment internally and externally is changing. And so you need to be then constantly keeping an eye on that environment and changing your project to suit those changes. Now, again, in there, they have environmental analysis, Pestel, and different tools like that. Again, they're straightforward enough, and it's great knowledge to get, because some of us at times, our head in the sand, and we're not monitoring that environment. The last part here is nearly like a catch-all about your project going live and how change needs to happen in an organization. And again, if your trainer is good, they should talk about, Cotter, Lewin, and other, back it up, the material that's presented here with more content than maybe the PMI are giving us as well. But it's the understanding that your project is going to bring about a change, and that you need to support the organization through that change so that your project can bring the benefit. If you don't support that change and get your project deployed, well, then your project could have spent a lot of money and actually not brought the benefit. Okay, so there are the 5 modules at a high level. The big question that frightened a lot of people last year and got a lot of people to do the exam was, if you Google changes to the PMP exam, you'd had these all fear saying, oh, it's going to go all agile. You're screwed, so it's going to change completely. You're going to be in serious trouble. And look, it's not. It's you don't need to be an agile guru to pass the exam. You need to understand Agile, and we'll explain Agile to you as part of the methodology selection. And then as we work our way through the course, we'll use Scrum, because that's what the PMI, the reference books, talk about. And really, I don't think you need to be a guru, but some of the questions, are they want really to understand the Agile ceremonies, the difference between a review and a retrospective, a sprint, a product owner, a Scrum Master. There's certain things they want you to understand. Now, again, to help people through this part of it, because we'd have a lot of customers that were coming from pharmaceutical, medical device companies, etc., that where Agile is not maybe a commonly used methodology. We carved out a separate 2-hour section in the course, a little Agile crash course and workshop. And people have said, okay, that gives me enough to answer these questions. And it also gives me actually some great food for thought, because some people had the completely wrong end of the stick in terms of understanding what Agile is. So again, they pick up that bonus along the way. So you don't need to be an Agile guru to pass the Pmp exam. Now, the learning management system. So the PMI now are mandating the use of their system, their notes, etc., etc. And you cannot get access to this unless you get a license key. And the license keys are only available through people like ourselves. So you can't get access to this. The keys are non-transferable because the material then is licensed to you. And you'll see in a moment that your name is on the actual document, all the different learning materials. And you have access to the materials for 12 months. So you buy a key through us, we allocate a key to you. You have access then to, the student materials. There's some videos in here, there's some surveys in here, etc. So there's a lot of material here. Now we're complementing that with our own exam simulator, because we're obviously saying that, okay, the material is one thing, it's the full exam experience is the big thing. So we have these mock exams then to support this for the 2 or 3 months after the course so that you get certified. So there's a lot of material in here, but it doesn't have full-length exams, and you need those as part of the solution. Okay. Have the questions changed? Now, this is the guidance from the PMI again. In the past, if anyone here did a course, you had the, multiple choice, 4 options. And now, the majority of the questions are the 4 options. Whereas now some of them are also kind of these drag and drop matching options. Some of them are kind of pick the point on a graph, etc., etc. Could be an earned value question, etc. Some of them might have, choose 2. So again, you have less questions, but some of them are that bit more tricky, and maybe the way they ask them. Now, again, what I've said to people all along is, fair enough, it's great if you see the different question styles in our simulators before the course or before the exam so you don't get thrown. But if you're asked an earned value question and whether to give you the data in a table, a graph, or a paragraph, if you don't understand earned value, the way they ask the question, I don't think is going to throw you. So we'd often say, well, if you understand it, you should be able to answer the question. And I suppose that again, if you're a borderline person, having all these advantages going in is very, very useful to you. Okay. People will often say then, why take an ATP course? And, been through all what we've, maybe to try and summarize this and get to some questions. I suppose, look, why take an ATP course? Well, I suppose the PMI have presented the material and they're saying this is the official material for our exam. It's been quality checked. It's been, and that's the thing is that, they can't go then outside of that. Whereas maybe in the past, people weren't fully sure what to reference. Whereas now we have the course. This is the course we're going to present. We might complement it, but we can't take anything out of it. Right. So that's the key thing is, whereas in the past, somebody might say, oh, I don't like that stuff. I'll drop that or ditch that. They can't now if they're an ATP. They have to present the course. The second thing is, if you're not happy now, you can send feedback directly to the PMI. So the rep that in the past, you had a barrier between you and the PMI. Now you can report the person in theory saying, I wasn't happy here. He didn't do X, Y, Z, and he didn't follow the process. Now we're being audited constantly as well, or they'll check in on us. But the trainers have been trained. And that's the key thing. So the materials are their materials. The trainers have been trained to their standard and vetted, but then we complement it with what we see as extra needed to pass the exam. Okay, so hopefully it gives people then that bit more confidence that at least I'm on the right course here. The guy in front of me or lady in front of me knows what they're doing. They have to go through a certain process. It's been there's a quality system in place, etc., etc. The last part of this, then, I suppose, really is you might be at different points in your career, and I can take questions on this privately if you want. Some people, they work their way up from the basics up through CAPM or QQI cert or whatever, eventually making it up to the PMP. And then we're seeing a lot of people that have done the PMP going on to the program manager certification. And no, that's a more difficult beast, definitely, to pass. And I've done it myself many years ago. It's not for the faint-hearted. Okay, but again, maybe that's a separate topic for a future webinar to discuss the PGMP, because we have a lot of members here in Ireland who have passed the exam. And for them, the natural progression is up the ladder to program management, etc. So I'm going to stop there because there's usually enough questions at this point, and I'd like to take some questions. So Katrina, is there anything there that you want me to try and answer?
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you very much. So like I had said, there's a lot of changes in there. That's definitely well worthwhile doing this webinar. So thank you very much for this. And we have a few people that joined us late there. So I popped it into the comments. Never fear. Recording and the slides will be made available afterwards, because there's a lot of food for thought. I have a couple of questions that people, as I said, you had sent me, but also we have a couple of questions here from John. So I'm going to see if this works now. If you can you see that question there? When one finishes the first part of the exam and starts the second part, can I go back? So can you go back to the question?
No, and that's the key thing we'll be talking to people in class about, John, is you have to get your timings right and say, okay, I'm going to do the first 60 questions in 75 minutes and I'm going to press submit. Because you need to keep your time for, like the PMI, the clock will stay ticking down until you press submit and call it. What we're also saying to people is don't rush those first 60 questions, because once you submit them, you can't go back. So those questions are submitted. You can take a break. You can leave your desk for 10 minutes, grab some water, come back in, sit down, and then go again. So there's no going back. And the same then with the second 60, you press submit. Now, John, this is actually a blessing in disguise for people, because you may know some people have a habit of changing answers in multiple choice exams. And more than we've seen this, we've proven it out, people that change their answers in a multiple choice exam are more than likely changing good to bad. So we'd be advising you, take the shot and leave your answer alone. Get to the end of the 60 questions in 75 minutes or ish, thereabouts, and press submit. And we've seen so much of this. And people often send class, go, oh no, I'm changing. And then they see I changed 10 and I got 8 of them wrong. So they go, actually, that could be the 4% of a swing vote you might need on the day. But look, people are passing it very well at the moment. So I'm pretty, and I got a stat yesterday. I was at a PMI meeting in the US. We're talking about the new program. And this probably will come out in the wash over the, when they have more stats built up. But the pass rates from the ATPs are higher than the non-ATP. And that's what they're proud of. They want to push this out, saying, oh, geez, this is brilliant. So going on the right course and all these quality systems in place are helping people. But I suspect the 60 questions and the break is really helping people as well, because you're able to go to the corner, take 10 minutes, calm yourself. And I had one lady recently, and she said, I remembered what you had told me, that she said she came out of the first 60 and she cried. And I said, what? She said, it was so difficult, the first 60. But she said, I gathered myself and steadied myself and I went back in. And she said, by the time I got through it, she said, I knew I had it. But she said the breaks were key. No, she was saying crying literally, as in she wasn't physically crying, but I'd say most of us that have been in the PMI center, I've been there for scheduling professional. Program management did nearly bring me to tears all right that day. But again, I passed them. But I knew I needed to steady myself, and the breaks do help you big time, John. Okay, thanks for your question.
Actually, so we do have a couple of procedural ones, some that I got in. So one was, because this was happening during the pandemic, can I still take the exam in person, or is it all online now?
It's at the moment, it's still all online. And actually, online is suiting people quite a lot. Now, I'm not sure is the centre open in Dublin as yet. Now, I assume it will start to open very soon. But it was quite difficult to get a seat there. And especially if you were based in Cork or you were in Galway, it was a whole day trip as well to get to Dublin, book into a hotel, find the place, etc. Now, there are a few people over the last year. And again, if you have good internet at home, there's no problem. Take it at home. But we have seen a few people, there's been a few problems with laptops, cameras not working, etc. And people on the day going, the proctor on the other side saying, I can't see you, I can't hear you, you've got 2 monitors, I don't want you having 2 monitors, and the exam getting shut down on them. So if you are going to take it from home, you need to be, I won't say IT savvy, but you can't be at least going to the exam center. There's a person there. If there's a problem, they can help you. But most PMs are reasonably IT savvy.
So I took an exam there recently, back in July. It is opening up again, and they have much more slots. But it wasn't a Pmp exam, so I can't specifically answer if they had opened back up again for the Pmp exam. But certainly the centres are open.
They are, and just for CAPM, if there's anyone here for CAPM, there's other centres like the ETB in Ross Avenue in Cork. They take CAPM, so there's other places you can do CAPM as well. In some of these training centres that the ETBs have, it's not necessarily always go to Dublin for the exam. So again, if there's something on that, I can check the centre in Dublin to see has it reopened. But a lot of people are quite comfortable taking the exam at home.
Yep.
Okay.
John had one more procedural one now, which was, this is if you are going into the centre to take the exam, they no longer provide a pad of paper to work.
That's true. That's true. If you're taking the exam, definitely from home is all I can speak about at the moment. Like in the past, they wanted what they call a clean desk policy. So they'll ask you to take photos of your desk, etc. And they want to make sure it's a clean desk. So you have no pen, no paper. But I would say, John, that the type of question they've been asking, the feedback we're getting from people is it didn't warrant the need. So you haven't been given, say, some earned value or net present value calculation that you might have got in the past that you needed pen and paper to work it out. So that's the first thing. So there is no paper, nor should you need it, right? Now, I know in the past as well, we would always have advised people, when you get to the exam center, get the paper and draw out your process map and do a memory dump and make use of the 15 minutes before the exam. That was already clamped down on. As soon as you started writing, the 4-hour clock started moving. So that little trick was removed a while back. But you shouldn't need to use the whiteboard, John. And I'm always saying to people, if you think something is too complicated and it's going to take you 4 or 5 minutes, should you answer the other questions first, mark that one, come back to it, and then spend your 4 or 5 minutes as opposed to, but there is a whiteboard there. But I know one guy there had too much information written in there, etc. And he just, nobody has needed it, John, I suppose, at this point. Okay.
Thanks. I know Terence just dropped a note in to say that the Dublin Test Centre has been open for the past couple of months. So, okay. And I think it's actually more, I suppose, more open, if that makes sense, on more days.
I would think so. Well. And again, it's for some people, it just takes another bit of stress out of the test to just go along and someone else is setting up, and if there's a problem, they reset the reboot for you, etc. And that has happened. Thanks, Terence.
Thanks, Terence. So look, this is one that I received in, which was, can you remind us of the eligibility requirements? And it was actually in a conversation. They were kind of saying how the eligibility requirements changed effectively. So
no, it's still 3 years with a degree, and they consider a degree a 4-year degree. So just in case you have ACCA or you have something else, if it's a 4-year equivalent, they see that as you have to document 3 years of project management experience. If you do not have a degree, if you have a diploma, you're leaving cert, you need to document 5 years of project management experience. And again, we help people, I suppose, with a little Excel calculator to get that story together. The one thing I would say, the eligibility requirements in the past, it was just a simple 550 character description, was 3 or 4 sentences saying, I managed this project. That's it. Whereas now it's 200 words. So it's a bit more, and I find with some people that they start to trip themselves up with their 200 words and start to use internal language that only their company would understand. So we spend a bit of time proofreading it with people, saying, look, nobody will understand what you're talking about there except you and your company. You speak like that, but outside your walls, nobody does. The other thing they're considering changing at the moment, so it's a 3-year or a 5-year. The other thing they've changed is, in the past, you could kind of put in a percentage of your time. Now in the online form, it assumes you're 100%, right? So if you are filling out the form and you said January to December, in the past, you might have said, well, I'm 50% PM and I'm the other 50% doing work. Well, then you'd have got 6 months for that. Whereas now it will assume you had 12 months PM. So look, sometimes you need to do the right thing there and say, look, maybe I changed the project duration to accurately reflect my hours as opposed to overclaiming them. And I saw some guidance coming out that they're looking at changing, if you have a master's, to reducing it to 2 years of experience. And again, that can be useful at times because you can only go back 8 years, and we have a lot of people, coming back to work. So I had one lady recently, she was out on maternity leave, she'd taken a bit of a career break. She's coming back now. She wants to get her PMP, and she's well able to pass the exam. She could give the course, but she can't apply at the moment because she can't go back all her experience is more than 8 years old, and she has a master's. So like the 3 years now is a bit harsh on her, really. So I saw some memo there from the PMI that might be reduced to 2 for people with masters. Now that hasn't been confirmed. Okay.
Interesting. Yeah, it's one more question on the application. So, and you had mentioned it earlier on in your presentation as well. In the training course, do you help people complete the application form?
Absolutely.
How does that work?
It does, because like if you just give them the training course, what we call the chances of them ever seeing the exam center are low. So what we do actually is we have a pre-briefing session before the course to say, okay, this is how you access the materials. This is the eligibility criteria, and we give them a little Excel file with that they can put their own story into, and we then review it, and then we show them where to go on the PMI website. So all they have to do then is cut and paste what they have prepared into the PMI form, and again, it's the standard. There's not as much auditing going on because of, in the past you could have physical letters and people signing them. They can't push as much of that at the moment because of COVID. But at the same time, I think if your story is legit and it's you've put it together as honestly as you can, the PMI have been very fair in reading them, as long as you've put an effort in. The only person I've seen getting rejected, Katrina, is a mad story. One guy, he didn't follow our advice. He just said, I'll do this myself. I'll submit it. He got rejected. And I said, show me your application. And the application was absolutely helpless. Now, I've asked him for permission to talk about this in class, but he said, I said, why did you do it? And he said, oh, I thought it was going to be like the NCT. You put the car in and they'll tell you what's wrong with it, and then you'll fix it up. And the PMI are not the NCT. They just said, go away and come back when you have the relevant experience, or please rewrite your application. And we have to do it right the second time. So you can do it right, or you can do it twice,
And actually, that's a question that someone had asked, because I think it's, if I do fail the exam, do I have to pay again? Like, is there, because I think there's a number of tries typically.
I'm going to say no, we've metrics to maintain. You cannot fail, right? So
you're not interested in people failing at first time.
I would say this, right? If you go on the course and we put you on the exam simulators, and we work you up, say, from 60% to 67 to 75. And if you're on 75% on the simulator, you will pass on the day. You will know before you're going that you should pass. And if you're not getting the scores up, well, then you need to move the exam date out. You shouldn't get yourself. Now, again, fair enough, the odd person will get very stressed on the day and get, will panic or whatever. But in general, if you know going in, you're well above the pass mark, you're 10, 15, 20 questions above it, you should pass, right? Now, your question is fair. Can I take the exam again? Yes, you can. You can take it up to 3 times. I've never seen this happen, right? You can take it up to 3 times. Do you have to pay again? They have a reduced rate. I think the full rate is $555 US. The repeat rate is, I think, about half that, maybe $200-300. But again, just when we're talking about exam fees, the $555, if anyone is thinking about doing the exam, you should really become a member of PMI first and join the chapter here, because they take the cost of the membership off the cost of the exam. So we'd be encouraging a lot of people to join the chapter, become a member, because you're getting it for essentially free. And then you might start to see the value in meetings where you'd see better speakers than me come along, and you might say, I learned something today. So it's a good opportunity to be involved in a profession like it, or a network like it. So again, if you are applying, become a member first and then apply. It's free.
Yeah. Well,
okay.
A couple of probably direct ones for yourself is, do you take a lot of students in your courses? And are you all online now, or have you gone back to the classroom?
The requests are coming back in to go back to the classroom. But at the same time, we were doing online before online. I suppose we had a lot of customers in the US and Southeast Asia and everywhere else. But it's been online now for the last year and a half. Now, initially, when people think about an online course, they go, oh my God, how am I going to do this? But what we've done is the 5 days are split into 2, 2, and 1. So it's not a 5-day marathon week, because what we found is people couldn't absorb that much information and get value from it. So we'll do a 2-day, we take a break for a week. We'll do 2 days, take a break for a week. We'll do 1 on the last. We usually don't take more than 20 on a course, usually 12 to 15. And that we're using breakout rooms and Zoom, etc. So it's not like me here today, webinar talking to you. They are live sessions where you are questioned as if you're in the classroom, and there's breaks, etc. So it's broken out. And the PMI, in fairness, with that train the trainer course, they reminded us a little bit of the idea of adult learning. And the modern learner, the adult, is a distracted person, because you have email, you have home, you have work, and it was kind of saying, okay, this is how you need to deal with the character in front of you. You give them some ideas, you give them a break, you give them an exercise, etc. And we've been seeing very high pass rates. So I'm actually quite comfortable now with the online experience, and people that are coming on the class are saying, I passed my exam, and yeah, I didn't have to eat hotel food. It was fine, so.
That's nice, but it is, like you said, it's the net result if you're passing the exam. So I've won the final one, and then I will start to wrap up for everyone.
That's okay.
And it's the one that gets asked. This is actually for me, because it was something that I was obsessed with when I took the PMP. What's the chances of getting audited, and what happens if I get audited?
Well, the thing about, it's a fair question. The PMI do reserve the right to audit your application, right? Now, if you have honestly filled out the application, you should have no fear of an audit. And in the past, an audit was just, they would want the person you put down as a reference to sign the form and say, yes, I agree that Katrina did this. And you would have to post in a copy of your degree or whatever you said you had. And that was it. It delayed you a week or two. It was more of a pain than an actual being a big problem. Now, if you had lied, it was a big problem, obviously, on any experience. And what we used to find was maybe some people had the experience from a previous company, and they might put down a reference from the previous company, but when they went back to that company for the signature, it wasn't forthcoming, because maybe they were seen as a bad leave, or you want a signature now, you can go to hell, maybe in some cases. But the need for audit, I think, has reduced dramatically. People put together a decent application. I've heard no one being audited. Now, I know some of this was maybe COVID related as well, that, posting letters, getting people to sign them, etc., was becoming a big problem. So, but I suspect now with some of that hopefully behind us, or at least a way of dealing with it, that audit is there. But it's not the big deal that people. Now, some people say in class, oh, I'll definitely get audited. And I go, okay, there you go. That's the one person that will. They nearly volunteer themselves for it, Theory X. But anyway, don't worry about it, and we'll help you through that process.
It does sound, it does sound like the ATP and the changes that they've made to the program, which are like they are quite onerous, for you. And like we have a number of ATP providers in Ireland, and you could get Seamus' details, by the way, on the Ireland chapter webpage, under the professional development. And you'll see that there's actually very few ATPs. So I would imagine that the need for audit will reduce as well, because there are so many extra, checks and standards
Yes.
now. That,
The one thing they are saying, Katrina, is interesting, and I was asking this at their meeting. I said, why am I paying all this license fee? Well, you're getting the materials, you're getting your trainers trained. And I said, yeah, well, what about the student? How would I convince them? And part of the application is the 35 hours. And they're saying, well, if a person has come through them and they have a key, well, we know they were on your course and we can check with you. Yeah. But if a person didn't go through an ATP, they're saying they are going to be audited, every one of them. Now, they're threatening that now. So again, that's their guidance on this. They want to try and obviously you have a lot of ATPs that paid money to get the license, go through all the processes, put the quality systems in place. And I suspect that they will eventually audit everyone that didn't come through their course, because that they want to get people onto that course. And from their point of view, they want to have them to have the proper education, maybe as they would see it. Okay. Look, I think, is there any other questions? If there's not, look, I'll send the slides to Katrina, and my contact details will be on them. You can find me on LinkedIn as well. And if anyone has any questions, look, just reach out. I'd be happy to answer them. And look, Katrina, thanks to the chapter and yourself for having us along today. Okay.
Thanks very much, James. That was very comprehensive. So as people are probably used to now, we do in the Ireland chapter register the PDU for you. So I've popped it up there on the screen, but we'll take care of that in the next couple of days as well. It's probably an important point to make, because it does crop up every now and then. If you don't have your PMP certification yet, you can only start gathering credits towards your PMP certification after you've earned your PMP certification. It actually does come up every now and then where people ask for their PDU. So in good faith, I put the claim in for absolutely everybody who attends the webinars. I don't have a method to check whether or not you have certification. So so you can begin accruing certification points once you pass the exam. So it's kind of good to know as well. But that wraps it up for us. So for everyone that's joined us, thank you very much for coming. Hopefully it means that you have put in a resolution for yourself to pass the exam this year. Seamus, thanks very much for giving us that update and bringing us up to speed on everything. We will have upcoming webinars. We're planning a couple at the moment. We were also very hopeful on the government's advice yesterday regarding the opening up, and we are hoping to start discussing a number of in-person events between now and the end of the year as well. So hopefully it'll be a mix of webinar and in-person, so we'll be able to reach out to all the audience Ireland-wide and internationally, because again, you'll see the context there. John was actually joining us from New York, so thanks a million, John, for joining us. But yeah, so the webinars have allowed us to reach people internationally, and we do kind of want to get back to the in-person events. So Seamus, thanks very much for joining us, and we'll just say to everyone else, thanks for listening in as well, and we'll see you again in a couple of weeks. Thank you.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.